Hello everyone, it's Thursday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. It is difficult to buy sea salt these days in South Korea as people in South Korea are rushing to buy it. This is as a result of growing public concerns over health problems with Japan set to release radioactive wastewater into the sea. Last Monday, Japan began a 2-week test run of the discharge facilities, hinting the planned release is soon approaching. What are the operators checking specifically, and how is the Japanese public seeing this? To find the answers to these questions, we invite a journalist in Japan, Hiro Ugaya. Hiro, welcome.
Nice to be here. Thank you very much.
All right, Hiro. First question. The operator of the wrecked Fukushima nuclear plant began final preparations, testing newly constructed facilities for discharging the radioactive wastewater. What exactly is TEPCO trying to take a look at it, and how are things going on right now?
Basically, TEPCO is doing the final check, machinery and technically, of the underground pipeline of releasing so-called processed water, and it has a 1 kilometer long from the coastline, and they have some pumps in between. So they're just checking pumps and the tunnels. I mean the pipelines of the releasing waters.
Right, so they are checking pumps and pipelines. Now,
Yes.
Hiro, it seems that Japan is just around the corner from releasing the wastewater, given that they are already doing the final preparations. As a journalist in Japan, what are your views on this?
First of all, I would like to emphasize that the regulatory standard the Japanese government is applying to the processed water is inaccurate and very misleading, because what they are saying, I mean, they are checking is that whether the processed water is safe when it's absorbed in a human body, like a drinking water. But that is not irrelevant to the effect on the environmental system, I mean ecosystem, when the processed radioactive water is discharged in the natural environment. So my point of view is that from the beginning, the government standard is, in a strong word, very deceptive.
Right, so they're not considering the impact on the environment right now, you're saying, right?
Exactly. In particular, they have never discussed natural impact on the nature, such as concentration of radioactive materials in a processed water. And my concern is that there has been many cases in which some chemical materials turns into the harmful materials to the human body. Probably the best known example is carbon dioxide, like CO2, because CO2 is produced in a human body, and we exhale CO2 every day, and it doesn't hurt our body at all. But once released in the atmosphere and accumulate in the long term, the CO2 becomes harmful in terms of global climate change, and that kind of long-term natural impact is not under consideration by the Japanese government. And that is very, very risky from my point of view.
Right, I see. I believe that is the concern that many people would similarly have right now. Now,
Exactly.
Right. Hiro, after the tests are completed, what are the next steps that Japan's government will take before releasing the wastewater? Are there any further steps they are going to consider?
I'm afraid not. They have publicly announced that they're going to invite some inspection team from IAEA or a Korean team, as you may know. But still, the government claims that their standard, it's safe as a drinking water, is appropriate. And they have never talked about the long-term impact on the ecosystem of this radioactive water. And this is clearly against precautionary action or principles. In Japanese, we call it yobo gensoku. And our government has never discussed how we are against these precautionary principles. And that to me, that seems to be a very, very strange contradiction, because the same Japanese government is promoting reducing the carbon dioxide. You know what I mean? But on the other hand, they are ignoring the precautionary principles and trying to start releasing the radioactive waters. So this is still very risky to me.
Right, I see your point. Now, Hiro, because of such concerns, not all Japanese people agree with the planned release, and the government is reportedly still facing some fierce protests from local fishing communities who are concerned about safety and damage to their reputations. How is the government dealing with such concerns?
The government has been paying a huge amount of compensation money for the fishery industry in Fukushima. And Fukushima's fishery industry has stopped operation since the year 2011, I mean the year of the meltdown crisis. And they have the government and also TEPCO has been paying the compensation for it, and the operation has not been started yet at all. So even if reputation damage will come back occur in the public community, the government will keep paying the money. That's everything they do. And it's just like buying silence or buying, what should I say? Like exactly, buying silence of the public. Am I making sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Buying silence. I believe that seems to be problematic itself, because money can solve everything, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. Now, not just local fishing communities in Japan, nearby countries like South Korea, China, and Pacific Island nations, they are also raising the safety concerns. What is the Japanese government's stance, and how is it trying to deal with such international outcry?
And Japanese government uses a very, very strange rhetoric of bureaucracy, and which they say like they will work hard to obtain rikai, understanding of the international community, and they never say they will ask for agreement of international community. Agreement in Japanese is called a goi, and the goi and the rikai are completely different language. So if we read in between lines, what they mean, I mean, they imply is that they will ignore whatever other countries will say. It is scary. And also, I have been warning that the discharging processed water, so-called radioactive water, into the ocean will internationalize our meltdown crisis problems of Fukushima, because the ocean, the open sea, is a public asset, public property of the international community. And there is no barrier in the sea which stops the spread of the radioactive materials. And one thing I hardly can understand about the behavior of the Japanese government is that there are other options of processing the radioactive water in practice. The one is that they can naturally dry out the water, I mean evaporation, which was used in 3 Mile Island accident in 1979 in the United States, and it turned out to be safe. And the other option is that they could solidify the water
Right.
by concrete mortar.
Mm.
It has been proved safe in the American nuclear site, and they could have taken the other two options, avoiding the international conflict by releasing the radioactive water. So I believe this is a very worst choice Japanese government made.
Right, right. I see, Mr. Ugaya. Now, that's all the questions I have, but considering all the concerns that we have talked about together, I really hope this issue could be tackled in a way that all people could not only understand, but also agree. Thank you for your
Yes.
insights. I really appreciate
Thank you
your
very
time.
much. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, up until now, we have listened to how the preparations are going in Japan, as Japan has announced that it could start discharging contaminated water from the plant this summer. Concerns in neighboring countries are growing, and South Korea is not an exception. To such worries, South Korea is holding daily press briefings to reassure people and let them know the correct information. But it is true that we still have many questions. And for this, we invite an expert, Arjun Makijani, president of the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research. Dr. Makijani, welcome.
Thank you for asking me back.
Thank you for being here. Now, Dr. Markizani, before we delve into the worries South Koreans have about the release of wastewater, I would like to ask you what Japan should consider most in terms of final preparations they're doing right now.
Well, I think Japan should stop these preparations. Honestly, we have been saying this for more than 1 year, well, about 1 year or almost 1 year officially. Japan should not be dumping this radioactive water into the ocean. It is a very deficient option. They have not considered the environmental impact on the oceans properly. The expert panel has said numerous times that ecosystem analysis is very deficient and that it should be redone. So at a minimum, and ecosystem analysis is not just a paper exercise. This is going to affect life in the oceans for a very long time. There's tritium, there's iodine 129. Iodine 129, of course, is part of the thyroids of us and part of the thyroid-like iodine processing in other living beings, including fish, even though they don't have exactly the same glands. This is going to last essentially forever. And, the half-life of iodine 129 is almost 16 million years. So what they are doing is really dumping in the ocean. That I use that word in a technical sense, and I think they should stop now, reconsider. As you've just heard, concrete is an option. The concrete option that I have and the expert panel has advocated is a little bit different. We think the water should be processed in the Alps system, and then concrete should be made for like the uses for concrete at the Fukushima site. There are plenty of them, and really they should international community more seriously, especially the Pacific Island countries, the Pacific region countries like South Korea, Marshall Islands, and Fiji. And they have really, while they have bowed deeply and talked, they have not taken those concerns seriously, in my opinion.
I see.
So they should do that too before dumping.
Right. But since you brought up the problem of this tritium, I'd like to ask you this. Officials in South Korea said that Koreans would be only exposed to 1/30,000th of 1 millisievert of radiation by the treated water containing tritium, which is lower than the level a person is exposed to when we are getting this X-ray. Does that mean we do not have to worry about it? I mean, what should we believe?
Well, the accepted regulatory practice in the United States by the International Commission on Radiological Protection is that every small amount of radioactivity produces a small risk. So that's one thing. The smaller the amount, the smaller the risk. But the risk is not zero. There are uncertainties, of course, at very small doses, and they have been repeatedly considered. But small risk means small exposure means small risk. And they are admitting exposure is not zero. So there will be some risk. And it will go on for a very long time. So it's not just our generation, but many generations. I was part of an EPA committee about 25, 30 years ago, 30 years ago, I think now, that considered a similar problem from disposing of high-level nuclear waste underground in Nevada. And we calculated the doses from carbon 14 would be much smaller even than what is being considered. And we thought that, and this included industry, government. I was part of a, a big committee that included government scientists, included industry scientists, it included academics, included NGO scientists like me. We thought it should be taken seriously, and it was. And it created, and I think, so when we have a X-ray, it's, you don't just walk in and say, give me an X-ray. You don't do that because there's a risk. We no longer say that it's nice to put your foot in an X-ray machine the way it used to 100 years ago and just for fun. It creates some risk. We take an X-ray because there's some benefit from it. If you have a suspected problem in your lungs or something like that, you want an X-ray so the doctors or the medical personnel can diagnose and treat you, or you can stop worrying about it. Here, there is no benefit. So whatever harm there is excess harm, especially as it can be avoided. And this is one of my big objections to this, is there are methods to avoid harm. It is in the IAEA safety regulations. It is normal safety regulations that if you can avoid harm, you should avoid it, especially when there is no benefit. And to South Korea and Fiji and the Marshall Islands and Vanuatu, there's going to be no benefit and only harm for a long time. I also don't think that Japan has done a good impact analysis, so I don't trust these numbers. I think a much better analysis is needed, and we can talk about that.
All right, I see your point. But Dr. Makizani, since the wastewater is still piling up, an expert added that Japan's plan to dump the wastewater is the most viable, into the sea, of course, is the most viable and safest option than others, such as disposing of it through the air. Is this really so?
Well, I don't think so. I think compared to evaporation, which I don't think they should be doing, evaporation would also create international impacts, but less than dumping in the ocean. And now part of the reason it was used at 3 Mile Island, as you've just heard. But the safer option that we have advocated, the expert panel for the Pacific Island Forum, is to treat the water with ALPS and then make concrete with it. Once you treat the water with ALPS, primarily you have carbon-14 and tritium in it, what are called beta-emitting radionuclides. That radiation is stopped by the concrete. So even if you get close to the concrete, your radiation dose will be essentially zero, less than what you would get from dumping. So, and moreover, if you make concrete with low potential for human contact, a concrete that they are using on the site for the seawall barriers and so on, you would avoid ocean pollution, which is essentially going to be forever, some parts of it, like iodine 129, and you would also avoid the kind of radiation doses, even if they are small. And I think Japan, I am not confident that these radiation doses are correct. And besides, I think we should first be considering the impact on the ocean ecosystems. I think the reproductive impacts on fish have not been considered, and I have a paper I can talk about that has been ignored, even though we have pointed out that you should be taking this into account.
Right, so there could be definite impact on marine ecosystem and marine products like the sea salt and the marine animals, right?
There will be impact on marine ecosystems. Nobody is denying that there will be impact. The question is how much. And in order to study how much, you really have to, it's not a simple thing to do. And what TEPCO has done, what Japan has done, it has simplified the idea of considering marine ecosystems to a simple formula of considering 3 species. One kind of fish one kind of seaweed, and crabs. And they have not properly considered reconcentration. For instance, iodine will circulate and recirculate for millions of years. Strontium-90 will not be completely removed by the ALPS process. Strontium-90 concentrates in the bone. And, it will go through the ecosystem. It has a half-life of 30 years. So it will go on concentrating maybe thousands of times. This has not been adequately considered. As one of my colleagues has pointed out, they have done some experiments with fish in a tank. Well, the ocean is not a fish in a tank.
Right,
And,
exactly.
and they have to do a more serious job, and they should compare what they are doing with the option that we have suggested, which is to clean the water and make concrete with it.
Right.
What Japan is doing is completely unacceptable, in my opinion.
I see your point. We should definitely think about what other ways we could find out to deal with the release of the wastewater. Now, I'd like to ask you more questions, Dr. Makizani, but apparently we are running out of time. So thank you for your insights, and let's see each other again. We appreciate it.
Well, I'd be happy to be back in happier circumstances. I hope we can discuss a better plan than what Japan is planning to do. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.